Okay, HTML5 video came on the scene, I guess, when the original iPad shipped, and it had some notable deficits, like the lack of adaptive streaming, the lack of DRM support, the lack of live support, the lack of true streaming, all that stuff. And everybody wants HTML5 video because we don't like plugins, but HTML5 video has never been capable enough for a lot of people to use the way they want to use it. And there's two recent developments, the media source extensions and the encrypted media extensions, that have the promise of delivering full functionality to HTML5 without plugins. And it's a very, very exciting time in the HTML5 world. On the other hand, sometimes things aren't as simple as they look, and standards sometimes come with some issues that you need to consider before you think, well, we're going to cut over, in the next week or so. So this panel I'm really excited about because we've got 4 experts to tell you what this is all about. We're going to start off with Will Law from Akamai, and he's going to talk about what the standards are, kind of describe them so you understand what it is we're dealing with. And then we're going to move over to John Luther, who's the VP of Devices for JW Player, and he's going to talk about how much or which browsers and which devices are using these technologies and which are not at this time. If you want to use it today, where is it available and where will it be available in the short term? Andrew Popoffs from By DRM is going to tell you what the encrypted media extensions are and how they work and what their limitations are in the short and medium term. And then David Hassoun, who's from a company called Realize, is going to tell you how you actually integrate this and make the transition from Flash to HTML5. So I really wish we had an hour and a half because I know we could really spend it profitably. So let me just get off the stage and give you to Will Law.
Thanks, Jan. Pleasure to be here this afternoon. A topic is gaining prominence when Jan picks it up for one of his sessions. So a lot of us have been pushing it for a number of years now, and it's great to see it getting the exposure it deserves. My job is to give you a very brief overview. I only have 6 slides. I want to get right into them. So we look at our traditional player environment today, and I see a lot of faces that I've known from the Flash world in this room, because Flash really allowed video to take off on the internet. It was Flash that created YouTube, and even in the last World Cup games a few months ago, 45% of traffic delivered over Akamai for those live streams was delivered via Flash. So a lot of people speak too early of its demise. It's still a powerful platform today. The trouble is, there's many devices arising, mobile phones and tablets specifically, which don't support Flash. The footprint of the Flash player is certainly declining. Smart televisions don't support it. Connected devices, Apple TVs, Chromecasts, and also game consoles do not support it. So in owner today, you're looking at 12 or more players, and I think there's some famous Netflix example of the hundreds of players, derivatives they've had to support. There's a keynote tomorrow from Netflix that may go into that. You need a huge player team if you want to provide what we used to be able to do with a single Flash player in the past across the wide variety of hardware and operating systems that we need to deliver video through today. So where's the promise? What if there was a single player development environment that could work across all of the devices I just mentioned that are sharing video, that could handle adaptive, segmented playback of video, not just progressive, allowed you complete control over the bitrate switching logic, the buffering logic, and the failure recovery, not leaving it all into the browser's hands and allowing you to vary it per application or even per user? What if it offered full DRM for protection of the content? What if you got all the richness of HTML5 and CSS, which you're already using to build your user experience? What if you could continue to use that to build your video experience? What if it didn't require any installation on the client? And what if it was free to use and extend? Now that all seems too good to be true. And it's in fact what is coming to pass with 3 new technologies that I think are going to change the landscape for player development. MSE, EME, and web crypto, or media source extensions, encrypted media extensions, web crypto. And the 3 of them together combine to produce some very powerful solutions for player building. Now, MSE is a W3C standard. It's in final draft right now, means it's not going to change. I'm going to compare that to EME, which is still undergoing a lot of perturbations. It extends the HTML5 video element, that's the / bracket video that you're used to putting in a web page, to allow JavaScript to add raw audio, video, and text objects to it. And delivery format is agnostic. It's not bound to any particular format. So I have a little animation here of how the video element works as you may know it today, or how it's worked for the last 8 or 9 years since it came about. Typically, you take an MP4 file, you feed it into your video element, into the source object, and it starts playing in the browser automagically. You have no control over when it starts to buffer, how much buffer it builds, etc. You can supply a WebM file if you're on iOS, and under Safari, you can supply an M3U8, which is an adaptive manifest. But you have no control over which bit rates are being picked. You cannot even query an API to figure out which bit rate's playing at any one particular time. But we've gone pretty far with just this video element. But now there's a way to improve it with media source extensions. So here's our same video element with the same source object. Now I can create a new virtual object in JavaScript. It's a real JavaScript object, media source. And that media source has buffers on them. And I've drawn them as sort of hoppers in a grain silo, because that's pretty much what they are. So now you take your same MP4 file you have before, but you cut it into little pieces. There can be physical cuts, or those can be virtual cuts, range requests. I do that for my video, I do that for my audio, and I do that for any timed text that I want to feed in. And now when I start handling data, I use JavaScript to grab the manifest, JavaScript to grab these little segments using XHR, feed it into this media source object, and as it gets them, it starts playing. But I, as the developer, have complete control over what video, what audio gets added to that element. All it's doing is the heavy job of decoding it and rendering it. So decoding and rendering is happening with the power of the operating system. It's not JavaScript doing that, but JavaScript is doing the fetching, the parsing, and the decision logic. Now we throw encrypted media extensions onto that, another W3 standard that extends HTML media element even more to provide APIs for protected content. We're talking everything from clear key, encapsulation protection, all the way up to full DRM. And we're going to go into more details of how it works. But here's my graphic again. So down here, the parts, we have the same video element, but now it's in a protected playback environment within the operating system, or at least there is this protected path for decoding and rendering the video. We have this new thing called a CDM, a content decryption module, and we have our same web app, which is written in JavaScript. We have our same media source object, our same source buffers, but now I'm supplying content that's fully encrypted. So I apply my content down to my media source, goes to the web app talks to the CDM, figures out, whoa, I need a key here. So there's a key exchange that happens with a license server. This might be Widevine, this might be PlayReady, this might be Adobe Access, it might be OMA, it might be Marlin, doesn't matter. The CDM hands it down, it decrypts the content in the protected part of the operating system, and the video plays back. So I have my full DRM, but delivered through the browser with all the flexibility of JavaScript. So in summary then, those three technologies combined with MPEG-, which I'm particularly in favor of just as a standard way of getting the segmented content to the video element, they overcome many of the legacy problems we've seen with HTML5, specifically how to do adaptive streaming, both live and on demand, how to do it for time-shifted streaming and all the complexity that comes with that, how to do DRM, how to do closed captioning, subtitles, in-band messaging, all the niceties and the extras that we need today to provide a professional solution. And I truly believe this is going to be the player structure that we'll go forward with certainly over the next couple of years, and eventually reaching the ubiquity that we had with Flash several years ago and extending beyond that across devices. I'll let the rest of my panel continue further on the subject. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. You know how to work?
Did you plug it in?
Yeah, I plugged it in. It's you know how to run this thing? We're trying to get it to. I don't think that's the problem. I thought it was.
My name is John Luther. I'm the Vice President of Devices at JW Player.
That doesn't have.
I'm going to talk about the media source extensions, but specifically where they've been implemented, in which browsers and mobile operating systems. as soon as we get the slides up. But just to give you a little bit of background on me, JW Player might not be as widely known a name as Akamai or some of the large ones. So there's a slide that, of course, our marketing department always wants me to show. We're basically the most popular web video player on the internet. It's been around almost 10 years now. It started as a college student's project. It's now grown into this sort of mammoth thing that's used all over the place. The September numbers in the slide are basically 10 billion videos streamed through the player to 900 million unique users, and it's used on about 1 million websites worldwide. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. I worked on the media source extensions at Google in their very earliest form, and then through the W3C process with Microsoft and Netflix. So this is a topic that I've been working on for a long time and is sort of near and dear to my heart. Oh, there we go. It just started work. Oh, cool. Okay.
It's the different
All
machine.
right, that's
the
all right.
Mac.
Cool. Okay, so this is the aforementioned marketing slide, already covered. So industry support, Will covered that. So in browsers, my arrows aren't showing up. The blank spots are green arrows. So the top two, Chrome and Internet Explorer, media sources, these are the latest shipping versions of the browsers as of November 1st, 2014. Chrome and Internet Explorer, this is not surprising, Google and Microsoft being two co-editors of the MSE spec and the W3C. Firefox, you'll see there's a little footnote there, has announced that they will support MSE. They are implementing them. There's a bug, there's a link down there. These slides will be circulated afterwards, so you can go and look at this. But there's a bug in there, Bugzilla database tracking the MSE progress. There's a lot of people in there who are sort of trying to push them along and say, come on guys, let's get this done. I'm hopeful it'll ship in their beta soon, but that's, we'll see. Safari, MSE is now supported in OS 10 Yosemite and later. That's Safari on Mac OS 10 only, not iOS. We'll get to that in a minute. And Opera supports MSE as well. So next, this is in devices. These are also, as mentioned, latest shipping versions. So Android, this would be Lollipop included since now it's shipping. So Android, Chromecast supports MSE. Fire OS, which is Amazon's operating system for Fire TV, Kindles, the phone. Nobody laugh about the phone. Opera, Windows Phone, and of course, as always, iOS is the elephant in the room when it comes to media source. At the very beginning, when we first proposed them at an open source sort of hackers forum, Eric Carlson from Apple was there, and he expressed great skepticism about whether this would work. We thought it did. So there's a history of them being skeptical about it. They have never made any announcements or plans that they will support MSE. That doesn't mean they won't. I'm hopeful that they will. But on iOS, still not supported. It is supported on Safari on Mac OS 10. So whatever speculation you want to make from that, go ahead. But that's the situation today. Jan asked me to just talk a little bit about codecs, which is also something I have a little bit of a history with. So we all sort of know the landscape with H.264. It's pretty much the market-leading codec. It's supported almost everywhere. This is native support, native shipping releases of these products as of November 1st. So HEVC, there's a lot of red X's there. It's not really supported in any browser yet. Not supported in Flash. Maybe that'll change in 2015. I haven't seen any announcements from anybody other than Adobe, but that was regarding primetime, not Flash. VP9, which is part of the WebM project, the successor to VP8. I used to work on that project. So this is also not surprising. Chrome, Firefox, and Opera support VP9. They were the original sort of, I guess you'd call them founding members of the WebM project when that open source codec was released. VP9 not supported in Flash, Internet Explorer, or Safari, and no announcements have been made there either. Device platforms, so again, 264, pretty well known in this room, so I want to save a lot of time for your questions. HEVC is now actually supported in Lollipop, which is the latest version of Android. It's supported on iOS, but it's only being used today. It's only iOS 6, and from what we know, it's only being used in the FaceTime, video chat application. Now, I think that codec is in hardware down there somewhere, which you would think it can be used for other things. That's all Apple's using it for today. VP9 on these, Android supports VP9, Opera, so Opera, many people in the US don't know this, but it runs on a lot of televisions and other devices around the world. They support VP9 in those platforms, and that's about it right now on the devices. So people actually using MSE in production, YouTube, as mentioned, VP9 in Chrome. YouTube is actually doing Dash with media source and VP9, also with 264 on YouTube today, serving it to Chrome, and they're serving a lot of it. So Netflix as well on HTML5, Hulu. So it's actually in production and being used a lot. This is actual stuff in production. This is not just speculation. This is actually replacing Flash on a number of services and markets today. So in JW Player, we're going to support Dash using MSE. We're working with Will and some other people on a project called Dash.js. In the interest of time, I'm not going to launch this demo, but there's the URL down there if you want to go and check it out or see me afterwards. We're really excited about the Dash.js project. We think that it's going to be really important in 2015 as more and more Dash implementations roll out to get that software really production ready and rolling. So all this and more is documented in a thing that we call the State of HTML5 Video. It's something that my company every year publishes. This wraps up media source extensions, encrypted media, a lot of the stuff we talk about today. It's all published in this report. We update it every year. We're going to update it in the spring. This gets a lot of traffic to our site, and it's full of a lot of rich information about all these topics. So go and check that out. And that is my time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Popov, and I'm CEO by DRM. Really quickly, who we are and what we do is by DRM is leading provider of digital rights management and content security services with 30 years of experience. We provide the world-leading US DRM platform to provide robust content security for IP video offerings to a variety of different customers. Today I would like to speak about the Dash, common encryption and EME, but specifically EME, because today we already have interoperable content with the help of the Dash and common encryption. The media content provides, the Dash format allows companies to inject multiple DRMs with a single file. Now, it has to be distributed to the content delivery networks, and basically the browser has the implementation of the CDN. What means CDN and how it all works? Encrypted media extension specification enables JavaScript applications to choose content decryption model. Depends on the DRM which is in the content, right? So, in other words, the JavaScript application Dash.js player receives the content and see, okay, we have 3 DRMs in the header of the file. We can pick Martin or PlayReady or WideWine, depends on what's supported in the browser, right? So the browser picks one of the CDNs which can decrypt the content. The CDNs basically communicates with the JavaScript application through the interfaces which are defined in the encrypted media extension. And then communicate with the license server. The license server returns back the key to the browser, and the browser the presentation loaded, or can you do it?
Either way I can do it, as long as I know where it is.
Just search, the
so
drive is
there is basically 3 ways of content decryption models interoperability. There could be common CDN, there could be one common DRM but different content decryption models implementations, or there could be common encryption and we can completely rely on common encryption interoperability. But still, there is few items which we have to consider. It's security, state interoperability, and licensing. Let me give you a few details about that. Security is the aspect which is important for us because now the content providers and content owners require mostly to tie the actual security on the devices, bring it closer to the hardware, right? So this is what we have to consider when we talk about the content decryption models and where it's implemented. Now, state of interoperability is important because if you work with the same platform, DRM platform, but on the different devices, right? So, and if different parties implementing the CDMs, there could be interoperability issues with that. Now, the licensing is the aspect where more and more content providers and solution systems, right, requires open source browsers to put on devices so that we can implement the DRM on multiple devices, right? And open source browsers doesn't need to actually incorporate something what they have to pay for. So we basically need to give them ability to implement CDMs without taking license of the different DRM systems. So what's interesting happened is Microsoft proposed and implemented content decryption model interface. It's a very interesting approach, and why? Because Microsoft saying, okay guys, let's take the whole content decryption model out of the browser. We're not going to implement it in the user agents inside of the browsers. We're going to move it to the platform. We're going to move it to the platform. We're going to create an interface in C++ wrapper and provide it to the open source browsers so that the open source browsers can communicate with the DRM. Have today in the market in terms of the implementation. So the Playwright mostly implemented in the Internet Explorer and works on Windows 8.1, right? And if you want to bring the Playwright on the other operating systems, you have a choice. You can take the Chromium open source browser and implement the content decryption model in the open source browser and distribute it to the customers. Now, Whitewine has a little bit, I could say, better offering with Google because they support Windows, Mac, and Android today. So you can use Chrome across these platforms. On the Firefox side, Adobe works with Mozilla in order to implement the content decryption models in their browsers. Now, modern DRM is completely relying on the open source browsers. So you have to implement your browser, implement the content decryption model in the browser, and then distribute it to your users. With the FairPlay, we still don't even know if it's FairPlay. With the Apple, it's a little bit unknown story, but what we can rely on is the Netflix announced that they implemented CDM support with Safari. So what we have basically platforms which can today already play back encrypted content in the browsers. Yes, it's not the final specification, but it's a specification which already allows to users experience this playback. Right. The only thing now which industry have to consider is that the times are gone when we could play back all the content with one DRM, for example, when was the case with the Silverlight player. I would refer to that because you could play it, install it once and play it in Internet Explorer, in the Chrome, in the Firefox, everywhere. Now you have to choose multiple DRM service, and then with a multiple DRM service, you can basically cover majority of the platforms. Depends, what it supports. Thank you very much.
So my name is David Alsoon. I run a company called Realize. Generally speaking, we do professional services, working a lot with video, major video players, major events, major video systems, integration. I've worked with a lot of different customers over time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, okay, great. Now we have this wonderful world of EMEs and CDMs and all this great stuff that is starting to show up that's going to enable us to transition away from the traditional plugin model of either Silverlight or Flash for DRM and bring that into the browsers. So how does that kind of need to take place? What are some of the considerations that we need to be thinking about when we do that step, when we actually go there? So, we had a lot of pros in the past. We know what those are. It was great. We had general ubiquity, but as the mobile realm, set-top, and everything else that's coming up, that's really changing that whole kind of market for us. So we need to really look towards this adaptation, and that's the good thing. And things like Dash are providing us an even better way for delivering out the content paired with this functionality as well. Now, before, when we just kind of look at some of the stack, the things that we were talking about, things we were using, I'm just going to focus on Flash for this, but that kind of be replaced with Silverlight as well for the most part. Before we just had kind of, generally speaking, one DRM service or platform that'd be Adobe Access. Now as we're moving, yes, there are going to be multiple within the CDMs and the different DRM services. Those are going to be where we start having these challenges and how we're going to have to adapt for that to really cover that spectrum of different browsers and different devices that are required. The nice thing when we start going from just the developers and the implementers who are going to go and do this, it is just going to be a fairly unified approach. Great, we're going to just be able to do this with HTML and JavaScript to be able to notify and be able to start that whole process using the EME down to the CMAs and so forth. When we come to actually delivering our content, it isn't just going to be just one format. It can be multiple. It can be HLS, possibly, in the future and so forth. MPEG Dash is being kind of the that stalwart first one on the scene that's really offering the great capabilities and helping also shape how this is going to work. And now, where are we implementing this? Well, from the kind of pure base perspective, where this starts off is going to be on the video tag. And I'll talk a little bit about that and show you guys that a little bit later on after we've kind of gone through a few things. So a big kind of question initially that we get with some of our customers, like, well, we've already invested quite a bit of money and time into building out this solution already with Flash and with Flash Access or with Silverlight or so forth. What are we going to be able to keep? What is going to be able to stick around? Help making those decisions on that ROI to make that shift. And the truth of the matter is, well, oftentimes not a lot. Once that content is encrypted, it might not work anymore when we start talking about working with other systems. With Firefox and using Adobe Access, there might be a better chance for reuse of that existing content, even within the HTML5 approach, but some of that is still kind of, I think, being defined. Now, one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about your existing investment is, just like Will said, for major events that are still going on today, Flash, desktop is still major. It's still a major player. So would I say go ahead and get rid of all that right now and just move everything over? Well, I would start doing that, but keep in mind you can still utilize your investment as is today for quite some time, but you need to start building on that auxiliary. You need to start looking to plan ahead and also looking how you're going to handle other things like Android and other devices as they kind of come up, and different delivery strategies as we start to unify and get away from, well, we have HTS and we have HLS, and we're still every now and then tinkering with RTSP or something really scary. So those are some of the considerations that we need to think about. Things like the JW player offer amazing capabilities that you can utilize both a Flash-based and an HTML-based experience, and allowing it to make its decisions based off of what the user is going to be able to support and when, and be able to go from there. We've also developed out a lot of players that do a lot of that stuff as well. So what are the actual skills necessary when we want to implement this from a developer standpoint? It really isn't going to be too complicated for the basics. There's also some stuff called clear key encryption and so forth that you can use for kind of early testing and validation of your system and your client-side player and code. Generally, it's just going to be some JavaScript, and then the complexity will grow as the different CDMs and the different token support that you have to manage is. But it isn't too crazy, and there's some great examples out there. The big challenge that you're going to really have to worry about is cross browsers, cross systems. All are going to have possibly different level of support when it comes to what they can actually decrypt or what they can work with from the CDMs. And that's where the challenges come in. But with some logic in your guys' player code, that's how that can be mitigated. So obviously, no matter what, there's going to be multi-bit rate. Never oversee that. I always like to put that out there whenever you can. That's one of the benefits of using these streaming technologies like Dash and things like HLS and previously HTS. As I mentioned, there might be some continued reuse of content that's been previously encrypted with Flash Access if you are using it. How many people here are using Flash Access for DRM? I got 2 hands. 3 maybe. All right, sweet. So don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about your content. Most of you guys, you're 2 guys, I'm really sorry. Everyone else, as you go to encrypt it, you're gonna have a nice fresh start, so it's not gonna be so bad. When you're really trying to think about that transitions, most of you guys aren't having to transition. It's just going to be going into new technology. So this applies a little less, which is fine. That's a good thing. But you have to keep in mind when you do start selecting out your DM providers, how is that going to manage? What's that going to work into your encoding workflow, your storage capacity and workflow, and how all this has to come together. Because right now, as we move into this new era with this, there isn't just going to be, hey, I'm just going to use PlayReady or Widevine, and I'm going to cover everything. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. The benefit is, we don't have plugins, and it's going to give us better reach and better technologies that we can start to utilize, but there is going to be a complexity with that. So you're going to have to keep that in mind and grow in your expertise of and understanding a little bit of how the DRM and keys are going to be working. Using things like an off-the-shelf player like the JW player can really help with going to market quickly and amazing functionality and testing that's already gone into that stuff as well. So that's always going to be a benefit kind of standpoint. And then from there, it's a matter of, what do you need on top of what they offer out of the shelf? Can it be customized in the way that you want to and be able to go from there? The cool thing of how this DRM stuff kind of kicks off is we mentioned I forget who mentioned earlier, but essentially the content that's going to be encrypted has a little bit of metadata that says it's encrypted. So when you go ahead and you put a file, and I'm going to use WebM for simplicity's sake as an example, if that file has been encrypted in the HTML video tag, it will automatically trigger an event of on-need key for me. That's what starts off the whole DRM management system in the JavaScript side. And it knows that based off of the metadata that's in the header of that file. The Dash stuff also has support to be able to notify this as well. Ultimately, what happens is it calls on need key, and then that triggers it off from there that we can then say, okay, well, what kind of keys are required to be able to support this? Or what are the CDMs that are enabled or required to be able to handle this content? And then I can start setting the appropriate key indicators and so forth on there, and then make the key requests and get that information back, setting things back onto that video tag as we get them and appropriately, and allows us to process out this video, and the rest is handled by this wonderful EME spec and people following the rules of the CDMs and so forth. So when to make that jump, if you're going to be really focusing on DRM, start working on it now. Start looking at what's going to be available and matching to your user targets, your DRM providers that you might want to use. BuyDRM has amazing services across the board to be able to help kind of make this stuff a reality. And then seeing how you can tie this in together from your player development, whether you're using a custom one, working with with JW Player, or how is this going to fit into your vision and so forth, and ultimately start trying to make this actually happen. There's other factors that are always going to come into play when you start talking about a fully featured application and a video experience, things like ads, enhanced playback, time shifting, DVR, and this is just a portion of this is on the DRM side and the security, but it can all play into this together and make out a true solution. There's some bunch of resources that we put together here as well, and also some examples on how to do this type of stuff. If anyone's interested, that will be able to make sure it goes up with the presentation. But I'm going to go ahead and hand this over back to Jan.
Okay, so we have time for a few questions. So we have the microphone back there that we can distribute to the people asking the questions. Yes, no? Okay, any questions? I'll just repeat them.
Sorry.
She's clever.
Oh boy.
repeat the question?
Any questions? Got to be some questions. For you, Ant, I just heard about this today. You were talking about the Microsoft proposal for open CDM.
For CDMI, yes, that's an open interface which they defined and they provided to the open source community so that they can use it and deploy it today with the open source browsers.
So we saw the dynamic that you set up, and it was, if you want to distribute to Chrome today, you have to use Widevine. But with this new specification from Microsoft, if Google picks that up, you'll be able to plug in different CDMs
Yes.
later?
Yes, and not only Chrome, right? Anybody, Safari.
The API, I mean, it's been around
It's
for
been-
a while.
yeah,
The API is in Windows. It only works on Windows 8.1 and later. What it does,
right,
it's an
right.
API that enables you to, I mean, basically the CDM for Windows is,
I would
in Windows.
add something because they put this CDMI on top of the Play-Ready device porting kit.
Right.
And so, as for us or for anybody else in the industry, we can take this device porting kit and port it to any different operating systems. For example, Fraunhofer with the Focus, they port it on Linux, right? And now with the Chromium, there is support of the Play-Ready DRM on Linux as well with this implementation. So they use these APIs to communicate with the DRM, which is on platform layer and not on the browser user agents, right?
But what was, the part that was never clear to me, and you might know the answer to this, is how much of the robustness requirements will be satisfied? In other words, will it satisfy robustness requirements for HD and all the other?
It will, yes, because it's
Even though it's
basic.
all in software?
Yes, well, that's another good thing about moving the DRM into the platform
Right.
closer to the hardware,
Okay.
because it will satisfy the compliance and robustness rules, right? Because, and as I said before, right, there is a trend which moving DRM into the hardware level, right? For example, if we speak about the Widevine implementation, it's already in a hardware based, right? So.
Okay. Will, do you keep track of any of the packets being pushed? Do you know how much this is actually being used today? I mean, you mentioned 45% is still Flash. Are you tracking any of the other?
That quote specifically was for the World Cup. Of the traffic that Akamai pushed, 45% was HDS, 39% was HLS, and the rest was other formats. So we don't track overall, and we also certainly don't track by customer, because that's private information.
Yeah. What about, do you know how
But
much?
certainly adaptive video is on the rise. There's an awful lot of PMD still out there, actually. But if anything, people are shifting to adaptive for two reasons. One is it does allow it does give you a better quality of experience as throughput changes. The other important reason with adaptive is with a progressive connection, you connect to one server and you're stuck with that download for the duration of the video. With adaptive, every 2 seconds or 4 seconds or whatever your segment duration is, you have a chance to do a new DNS lookup, or also get content from a different server. So you can have seamless failover between CDNs if you want it with adaptive that you don't get that benefit with progressive. So there's many advantages to moving over to adaptive, and we see the whole streaming industry moving that way.
What's going to break the logjam on every device has its own DRM? Is it going to be the Microsoft spec? Is it going to be something else? Because that's the biggest. You're going from supporting one DRM provider to now supporting 4, and if you throw CE manufacturers, it's 5 or 6. So what's going to break that logjam?
So just one.
Yeah.
The logjam might not be as big as you think it is.
Yes, that's exactly
because of
you and I
common
think,
encryption.
right, yeah.
So common encryption says, here's my file.
Yep.
This much of it is commonly encrypted between all those DRMs you just mentioned. I insert some little different headers to support all of
Exactly.
them.
Yeah, the encoding
and
side,
my content prep side, if you go to buy DRM and you click the button for give me 3 DRMs, it'll just happen. And you get one set of files you put on your CDN, you deliver them to your player figures out which one to use at the right time, and it plays.
The only difference in that, this is the way it was designed, the only difference in that entire stack is the request made to the license server. The license server is the only, if you encode everything in AES, common encryption, everything else, the permission slip to play this stuff.
Yeah, I get, I mean,
And
I
so-
understand the common encryption, I understand the encoding side is pretty simple. I'm worried about, you know,
call-
today I write checks to buy DRM if I'm doing play ready. How many checks do I have to write? How many DRMs do I need to support, and is that going to be an additional burden?
One check to buy DRM, because basically we will
And 3 DRMs.
and 3 DRMs, because that's our focus, right? I mean, for the service providers, the thing is changing, right? So we have to add multiple DRMs in our platform so that you can write only one check, and we can, you know, surface that for you, so that it's not a problem for you.
And that works out great when you're using a service provider. The challenge, though, is for those who are trying to implement this on their own systems internally, they now are going to have to look at deploying multiple DRM systems to cover the spectrum of their user base, or they have to restrict the users to browsers, which is just as bad as plugins.
And Adobe doesn't go via third party. Adobe is 100% direct, as is so several other DRM providers. So there are going to be
They've
some
shifted
issues.
from previous flash access, which
Yeah.
was deployable, to now more of just a pure service orientation.
I still think it'll be a better world than what you used to have, which was very, very highly proprietary DRMs. They all had their own file formats, for God's sake. They had their own encryption algorithm. Everything was, like, for example, just take Widevine, for example. Like 5 years ago, the Widevine player was a gigantic binary executable file that had to be installed. Everything was secret. There was nothing, you know. So now, common encryption, all these other things, is a step in the right direction. It's not perfect. You still are going to maybe need to, and Widevine's free now, so you won't even really have to write a check for that if you didn't want to, but I think it's better. I think we've definitely made a step in the right direction.
But we still have a
I
major
refuse to be
challenge
pessimistic.
between-
It's
yeah,
still
I
a
mean,
challenge, but
Firefox being now that they're just going to be only kind of focused on using access,
Right.
not knowing how that's going to pan out, on
Yeah, I don't
top
know.
of the elephant in the room, iOS, and when and what's going to happen with there, which is majorly impactful in people's decisioning factors as this moves forward. It's amazing where this is looking, and the common encryption is definitely awesome and a massive step in the right direction, but there are major hurdles for true larger scale adoption.
Well, David, what are you seeing? To tell the truth, you know, what clients or viewers, and don't name names, but how much of this are you actually working on today versus?
Not a lot of active, a lot of people looking and kicking the wheels and kind of doing some early POC type of stuff, but we don't have, in the customers that we've been working with, and we're a small company, but we work with big customers.
Yeah, you got big customers.
You know, it's been less because there's still this challenge of how is this going to really work and look. And honestly, I mean, for a lot of the customers, of our bigger customers, you know, Apple defines the path. They don't like it. I don't like it, but oftentimes that becomes the
it's true.
driver.
But the good point was made that even today, but YouTube uses MSE, and 98% of their content is Dash, and that's the biggest web property out there, followed by Netflix, who also uses MSE. So you've got just under half of all web traffic on a Saturday night is using MSE. That's significant. You can think of this as the polar landscape, and there's two big icebreakers out there, YouTube and Netflix, that are going through and doing all the hard work with the standards bodies and the browsers and pushing through a professional solution. And we can all just sail our little boats in behind them. And we should, instead of going over the ice ourselves.
Well, speaking of that, I'm sorry, are there questions out there? I'm kind of hogging it, but do we know if Apple's going to license Fairplay? I mean, we think that that Netflix did license it for Safari, but
Well, they licensing only to the content owners.
Right.
Right.
That's the key question.
I recently made a joke. We have to make cartoons or something, right? And say now we're content providers and get the license.
Right.
But yeah,
it's a DRM joke. I had a compression joke, nobody laughed either. So, so Andrew, did you just announce that Buy DRM is going to start doing multiple DRMs? Because you,
yes,
Okay.
Yes, we certainly looking into that. We have a POC going on right now, Marlin and Widewine. We actually working closely with Adobe as well. So
Okay.
yes. Cool. And it makes sense. We was looking into that. I was looking into that 4 years ago actually, but there was no market for that yet. So now it's a time for sure.
Okay. Any other questions from the? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Say it again.
Wait, access the slides. Can you get the slides?
The slides. We'll look at the slides posted to. I'll tell you what. My website is Streaming Learning Center, and I'll get them posted today, and then they'll be posted on the streaming media site within the next 2 to 3 days. Okay, these guys put a lot of work in it, and I think it was a great presentation. So let's give everybody a